Today is the official opening of the 2023 World Police and Fire Games. The 10-day multi-sport Olympic-style competition features athletes from over 70 countries. As many as 8,500 participants are expected to be in Winnipeg for the Games. But tonight's opening ceremonies will also be the focus of a protest. For more, we're joined by James Welt with the group Winnipeg Police Cause Harm. James, thanks so much for joining us here today. You recently wrote an opinion piece on why the World Police and Fire Games in Winnipeg sends the wrong message. Can you explain why?
Absolutely, yeah. So since the summer of 2020, we've seen a lot of protest and resistance against police violence in Winnipeg and, of course, around the world. And this has most recently culminated in the blockade at Brady and the families and loved ones of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people who are calling out the Winnipeg Police specifically for their inaction in searching the landfill. And so we think because of this recent history and because of what is going on in terms of the demands to search at Brady and Prairie Green in the context of police inaction, we think it is grossly inappropriate for the World Police and Fire Games to be hosted in Winnipeg. Further, these games are costing a great deal of public funds. Altogether, we've calculated that they're costing about $9.3 million between the three levels of government, and we think that that's money that could be far more effectively used to keep people safe through things like housing, safe consumption sites, food distribution, and so on.
Well, and James, the Athletes Village it's going to be pretty close to the Camp Mercedes that's set up, a camp by people calling for the landfills to be searched for their loved ones. Why do you think that's problematic?
For sure. I went down there the other day to just check in on how they're doing, and it is like immediately beside Camp Mercedes. And quite ironically, Athletes Village has a teepee of its own, but the entire Athletes Village is fenced off. It's accessible only to athletes, family members, organizers, and volunteers, which means that people who want to use the forks for any other means during what would be sort of the peak of summer are denied access. And this includes people at Camp Mercedes and the families and loved ones of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. And so we think that this is, or I think that this is like a really exemplary instance of why the World Police and Fire Games are so inappropriate, is that there are going to be up to 8,500 more police, immigration agents, correctional officers, and so on, who are going to be at the Athletes Village. And it's kind of almost salt in the wound, the fact that these families and loved ones have been fighting for police to do something, to do anything, but we're just seeing increased repression against these people. So I think it's just a really bad look for Winnipeg that attempts to pride itself on supposed reconciliation. And it's going to be a tough time for Camp Mercedes to deal with the fact that there's going to be so many more people like this in their vicinity.
Well, and there is a protest planned for tonight for the opening ceremonies. So who's taking part in that and sort of what's expected from that?
For sure. So we're starting at Central Park at 5 p.m. and leaving at 5:30 p.m. And the idea here is that there's a long-standing bike ride called Critical Mass, and the idea of that is just to take up space in the streets, and so this has been going on for a long time, and so it just so happens that it falls on the last Friday of every month, which coincides with the opening ceremonies of the Games. And so there will be many people who will be coming out, and we will be doing a bike ride throughout the downtown and meeting up with people who are on foot at around Broadway and Hargrave, which is adjacent to the opening ceremonies pathway to Canada Life Centre. And the idea there is just to have a really visible representation of opposition to the Games, that not all of Winnipeg supports these Games, and the extensive use of public funding to do so. So we're going to be calling for obviously searching of the landfills and for money to be used for other things that actually help keep people safe instead of just parties for cops from out of town.
And James, last one for you here quickly. The Games run for 10 days. Do you anticipate any other protests happening?
I think so, and I believe that the Games themselves are anticipating them as well. It's been reported that there are special protest zones that are being set up at each of the events. We'll see how things go at those sorts of spaces, but I think the idea is certainly to keep the momentum going. I don't think there's an intent to necessarily disrupt the athletes or the sports themselves, but it's just to, again, visibly remind people who are coming in from out of town that Winnipeggers do not support the use of public funds in this way, and that we're going to continue continues to call for other uses of public funds, not only during the games, but well beyond it as well.
And James, we'll have to leave it there, but we certainly appreciate you coming in and taking some time for us.
Thanks so much for having me.